Alrighty, hello everybody and welcome back to Solo Score Rush. We are going to kick off this round of 16 weekend with a couple of more of these early matches. I believe this is the last one before we hit Saturday. And what better way than a two forces pretty much just colliding kind of match. We have Tonels and Ellis Astal going to fight off against each other. Two very strong players in this tournament, going to duke it off for their ticket to stay alive in this winners bracket to, I believe, versus Paven next week in the winners quarterfinals. As always, I am Arasani commentating this, and co-commentating along with me will be Snow.
Hello everyone. It's been a day, I think, since the last match, so definitely a lot of break time since that one, but we are getting into this winner's match as stated. And this one I'm very interested in, especially just seeing these two players both being especially strong, especially when it comes to a pool that's not even like too easy, but not too difficult either. A bit of a more kind of mid-game pool.
Yeah, I can definitely see the step up from the round of 32 pool. It's quite significant, so I believe this map is still physical enough for these two, most definitely. But I feel like looking through the lens of both of these players, I think Tonels would probably want to go for something a bit more physical, maybe try to beat out Astal in some of these more physical picks. And I feel like in both these players' headspace right now, they're going to probably aim for some of those more long note based charts. So I feel like, yeah, those two rice bands, we're probably going to see that happen again once the second bands come around. We're probably going to remain in this lower part of the map pool, and probably some of the more denser picks on the side of Tonel as well. Maybe Astal's strategy looking at a bit of a different lens. Maybe we're going to try to just capitalize off of the release caliber and dive into a bit of more of that accuracy range. Maybe see just try to beat Tonels in the classic accuracy game. But without further ado, we are going to head into the picking process. It will be Tonels' first pick here.
I don't really think any of these picks are really safe per se for either player. I mean, especially just because both these players have shown extremely strong accuracies just throughout any tournament, really. I mean, Astal being more of a kind of player who's been starting to build up their name a lot more, and Tonels just being someone that I think most people might be familiar with a little bit, especially with their performance in 40M, that I think most people might recognize Tonels from.
Yeah, for sure. And Tonel's actually just going to throw everything away that I just said about this pool. And actually going to jump into Rice 1 here, Revolver, the more speed-based pick here. And you can already kind of see way higher significant BPM than we've seen from last week. So maybe just going to try to play it off as just seeing how well that physical caliber has hit both of these players. And like I mentioned, this pool has scaled up quite a bit, and you can already see from this opening.
I'm more interested to see how this kind of ends out. I mean, obviously both these players are able to hold good accuracies on either pick, so obviously on one hand, it is going to be a ratio battle, especially on a pick like this one that's a little bit more technical in terms of the streams, but I feel like it's really going to come down to who can hold the better consistency overall.
Yeah, I feel like consistency is going to be that final domino that will fall to kind of be the deciding factor on who will gain these points. And even then, I feel like these players are so neck and neck and these pretty much in that physical and consistency range that it won't be by a large amount. I don't think we'll rarely hop into like that 20,000 point range. I feel like even at the very most, at least like 15,000 will bleed into someone's favor. And we're probably going to see like maps like these where this lead barely in the thousands, even just dropping down into that triple digit range. And right now, as these streams pick up more of these mini jack slash trills, not going to catch up anybody, as we're virtually tied with the exception of Astal, probably just trailing back a bit, but the lead is actually in her range. But now it's flickering back and forth. These players are virtually tied. Final quarter to go.
I think as we do get into this final section though, that stamina aspect is definitely going to become a lot more apparent, especially as we start to see a little bit of this more kind of technical stream aspect start to build up a little bit. Obviously, this is the prime area for us to see any misses at all.
Yeah, and as you say that, Tonels drops the first break and the only break we'll actually see in this map, and that will bleed about 5,000 points or so in favor of Astal, and they will be taking that first pick by not by much actually. If that miss didn't occur, I think the lead would have still went to Astal, but not by much. It was the deciding factor of that 200 and that extra 100 that was picked up. But Astal going to bring roughly almost 7,000 points in their range off of Tonels' pick, going to basically take a break point here, but not by much.
I find it very, very interesting that we see a little bit of a noticeable increase in that ratio on the side of Tonels. I mean, all things aside, obviously we did see that miss, but obviously if a player misses, especially on a pick that tends to be something of the lines of a speedier pick where a lot of nodes are just on screen at the same time, it's very easy to just get a miss, and then for that to kind of just build up ever so slightly, even if it's not too much of a 30 miss. But we do see Rice 6 Rice 5, and I think this one's a little bit of a risky one still, especially given how that last pick went, and this one being, I would say, somewhat similar. Obviously not as continuous, but it doesn't rely that much on that consistency aspect, I would say.
Yeah, you put that well. Not as lengthier as Rice 1, heading into a custom chart by Livy. I'm dancing with some body. And I feel like, once again, it's just mainly going to be that consistency factor. Maybe even the stamina might even be a contributing factor as well, because we did see Tonels holding up fairly strong, actually out-ratioing Astal in that ratio department, but it just came down to that singular break near the end of the chart. And I mean, if we see that pattern continue on these uncomfortable technical abrasives like mini jacks here with some trills on one hand, and even some anchors being sprinkled here and there, this is no easy feat to just be casually carrying a 99.85, even with some combo. But I mean, these two players are notorious for absolutely treating these maps like child's play. But it's just going to be risky if it comes down to that miss department and the consistency, especially near the end of the pick.
I don't think a pick like this one will rely too much, especially on that kind of mini jack aspect like you mentioned. I mean, sure, you might see a few of them every now and then, especially considering that this is very fast dump. But I think the thing that'll come into play here is especially going to be that finger independency, especially with finger independency being such a prevalent skill set in something like Rice 1. This one also following suit very similarly, so I think Tonels might just have the advantage on a pick like this one overall, especially given that it's not as continuous.
Yeah, and right now, heading into the final quarter of this chart, Tonels having a roughly 1,000 point lead in their favor, so not by much, but it's still a lead nonetheless. And I mean, this is what we saw last round, and we're gonna see it happen again. Tonels gonna drop another break, and nearing the end of the map, but this time it's a lot less severe. They still have that accuracy advantage, but even with that Astal holding that combo game very strong, and now that lead's gonna increase basically the same lead she had with Rice 1, and the map will come to a close. 7.5 thousand points in favor of Astal, and it came down to that miss component once again.
Definitely very interesting to see. I definitely see nerves being a little bit intact here, especially on a pick like this one where the ending can get just a little bit more technical and just tricky to combo and even hold accuracy altogether. It makes sense to see a miss from Tonels. I think on a pick like this one, a miss from either player generally makes sense.
Yeah, I genuinely feel that you put it very well with maybe just the nerves getting the best of Tonels, as especially nearing the end of the pick. And we're gonna just continue on with this Rice pool. We're gonna see Rice 4 come in here.
This is an interesting pick. I feel like maybe this should have been saved a little bit later on, especially with how we've seen Tonels kind of choking a little bit with the endings. I mean, sure, this is a good pick on paper regardless, but potentially maybe those nerfs might kind of end, especially as things start to stabilize a little bit more, and Tonels might be able to get a little bit more consistent, especially just seeing how much work they have to put in. So I think maybe Rice 6 might have been slightly better, but I think this pick can work regardless.
Yeah, depending on what you go for here, it's still relatively going to be the same output pretty much. And right now, you definitely see a lot more of these very tricky, more rice components, lots of mini jacks and bursts, and actually going to catch up Tonels with one of those transitions, going to pick up the first break of this chart. But then again, fairly early on in the map, we're only around the first quarter, but look, then again, these one-hand trills, these pretty fast mini jacks clocking in at roughly 175 BPM, but nothing too fast, but very tricky to nail. Just basically lots of these nasty technical slash stream sections throwing in here, and Astal actually going to trade that break pretty late, however. That will shrink the lead down to roughly 3,000 points or so.
Yeah, even despite us seeing Rice 5 last pick, which I would say is a little bit of a smoother transition into a pick like this one that's very technical and very abrasive, containing just a little bit of that kind of burst aspect that we saw with Dancing with Somebody. I think this pick still, regardless of how you transition to it, it is so hard to keep consistent, especially on a skill set that is just a little bit on the more niche side.
Yeah, and right now, Astal still managing to man the floor with this lead. If you can even call it at that, only about 1,000 points, but Tonels actually going to add roughly 5,000 points to that with another break transitioning back into these very abrasive, pretty abundant, nasty, bursty streams, I guess you'd call it, one-hand trills being thrown in here. Now that lead going to increase now to almost 10,000 points, nearly hitting that mark. But Tonels quick to jump back to that 400 combo cap, so we'll ease the bleeding just a bit. But that's not safe to say that this map still has these nasty bursts, these nasty mini jacks, pretty much everything that caught up Tonels and Astal earlier on in the map. And I mean, if Astal can continue this combo that they have slowly been building up, I do not see any fault at seeing her taking this lead by a comfortable 10,000 points and adding even more to their lead. Just shy though, but still, it's a win nonetheless.
First from both these players, Astal actually having the advantage on a pick like this one, which I think is a little interesting to see, but given that this is a bit of a more abrasive pick, potentially all of those more kind of technical picks, at least on the side of Rice, are exhausted out. So we could see a switch up maybe, especially given that the first two picks are very, very heavy on that kind of finger independency.
Yeah, I feel like maybe Tonels is gonna have to think in a different, way here for their next pick here. And yeah, they are gonna jump into that LN department. They are gonna go for LN4. So Ad Astra will jump in here. Gonna leave that Ska map Rice 6 up for grabs, which is a bit interesting because, I mean, seeing how close Rice 1 was, it did come down to the final parts of the chart, but I like to compare this Ska chart, Interstellar, I believe, to one of their previous charts, which is Odd Loop. I like to draw comparisons to those streams. Very heavy on that outer column base, but I mean, we are just gonna jump gears and head into the long note department, LN4, and I think this is these two players' bread and butter, at least in my eyes. I know Astal, one of the few LN prodigies that are in her in her skill range at least, and I mean Tonels being one of those players, so gonna be interesting to see how this one will play out.
I think for Tonels, this is a good experimental pick, especially given, I guess, its kind of simplicity yet complication in a pick like this one that we don't really see much in a lot of other tournaments, if any. But at the same time, a pick like Ellen Walls being a little bit on the simpler side to put good accuracy on could potentially give Tonels just a little bit of that information that might be needed to strike back potentially.
Yeah, with a lot more of these walls coming in here, I mean, we do know that Astal very solid when it comes to that release component. I feel like that's what Tonels is trying to poke at here, is more or less trying to test out the waters on how well is my opponent's release when it comes to these more abundant walls. And both these players are going to trade a couple 200s on both sides, so fairly I would say just a couple hundred points in Astal's favor right now, but we still have a lot more of these tricky walls, some of these anchors, almost anchory type long nodes kind of raining down here. We'll up the lead by just a tiny bit, just off a sheer accuracy gain from Astal, but I mean, nothing a couple 300s won't solve it. These players are virtually tied. Heading back into the second wall, we are going to see a 200 from Astal. I don't think we're going to see it traded just yet by Tonels, however.
I feel like this one's extremely decisive, especially given that a pick like this one requires a lot more hold strength than maybe some of these other picks, especially compared to something like LN3 or maybe even LN2, which we've seen time and time again is been kind of a pick with a little bit more kind of LN strain that many people may not have exactly thought would be prevalent. But a pick like this one could potentially test the waters for something such as LN2.
Yeah, and here comes the final quarter of the chart. Just going to see this repeating wall, just a bit more denser this time, and I feel like more or less these walls are easy to manage. But Tonels gonna find a slider break, I believe. I think that might have been a slider break, if not a break at best. And I don't know what I don't know if it was on the wall itself or it was on just trying to hold the rest of the LNs. And ladies and gentlemen, with not so many maps left to go, I don't think Astal is willing to give up another break here. And I mean, they haven't given up any of this entire chart, and a 991 coming out from her. Very close pick. It just came down to those those breaks, and Tonels unfortunately going to pick up 2. We'll give that lead into Astal's favor. Not by much though. Only less than 4,000 points in her favor. So still not even at the 30,000 mark yet, and we are in with the second bands already here. And a bit interesting to see that Tonels had the better ratio by exactly 100-300. So it would have just came down to, if those misses weren't there, Tonels would have actually taken that pick, but I don't think it would have been by much. And heading into our second bands, we are going to see an LN1 band from Tonels and a hybrid 1 band from Astal.
This is quite an interesting band selection, especially just because, like, we saw how the other races went, and we see that Tonels is still struggling a little bit on that consistency side. So I would have thought that maybe something along the lines of Rice 6 might have been a bit of a better band, just because it is the longest out of all these other remaining picks. But I think Hybrid 1 can make a little bit of sense, just given that it does have a little bit of that techie aspect. But this next pick, I definitely do think it's a little bit more in favor of Astal, just given its dump component of it.
Yeah, I mean, we are going to be heading into Hybrid 2. JR, another custom made by Livium. And this chart does not hold back. It is very hard to keep some form of combo in this chart. Lots of these abrasive bursts coming out of in between of these more tricky to hit staggered LNs with a bit of shields mixed in here and there. I feel like the main key takeaway from these parts here is just to look out for those streams that kind of come in here and there with these bursts that are pretty easy to drop a couple 200s on if you are not careful with that transition factor. And I mean, once that back half comes around where it becomes a lot more Rice focused, I feel like that could also be a bit of a trip up for these players. But heading into the first drop of the chart here, pretty much a repeat of what we keep on seeing, but we're gonna see some mini jacks pop up here, and that might be a factor as well, but we're gonna have to find out.
I think in general this pick is just a little bit of a racey hybrid to an extent. I think at this pick, it's probably the easiest physically in terms of like all the hybrids, maybe even some of the LNs. But the main difficulty that does arise, as said earlier, is just the fact that you have to go from all these LNs into really fast sudden Rice bursts, which just makes it a lot harder to hold good accuracy on. Maybe not the combo as much, but that accuracy is definitely going to suffer.
Yeah, and Tonels did find a 200 from earlier, but still a lead by only 400 points in favor of Astal. And we haven't even gotten into the more Rice dependency part of this chart yet. And Astal can actually trade a couple 200s back in favor of Tonels and a break as well. But still, like I mentioned, we are not at the more Rice dependent section yet, but still bit interesting to see a break in this little tiny break section, if you can even call it that. So shouldn't be too long until they jump back up to that 400 combo mark, and there we go. And we're about to head back into the pretty much the main part of this chart really soon. And here we go. Not gonna catch up Tonels here, but very repeating patterns with just these with these bursts and then these LN transitions until that right section comes in.
I think if Tonels is able to hold on to a section like this, he might have just found the weakness to potentially get some of that score back, especially given that he only has 2 picks left, and given that only one of the hybrids is left, it's going to be really interesting to see what gets chosen besides that one, as I think Hybrid 3 might just be the strongest pick for him, given how this one's going.
Yeah, and we just passed that more rice-dependent section of the chart. Both players phenomenally hitting that, and I mean, as long as Tonels keeps that combo in place, I mean, this map, pretty much nothing left to it outside of these last releases, and Tonels are going to actually get some points up on the board here. And wow, although it didn't come down to ratio, if it did, that would have been insanely close. That one singular break from Astal kind of bled over those extra couple thousands of points on the side of Tonels, but once again, Tonels maybe might have found a bit of a weakness in or Astal's kryptonite here when it comes to those more LN dependent or more rice dependent hybrid, kind of more denser picks here. But we're gonna jump back into the rice department with rice 6.
This is a very interesting pick. I mean, especially given that we haven't seen Tonels stay that consistent, especially on a pick that is this long compared to all the other ones. There is a little bit of a worry, but I think with how we saw Hybrid 2 go, potentially this is Tonels' time to strike back, and potentially we might see that consistency be brought up, and potentially Tonels might be able to get a little bit of a score lead.
Yeah, I mean, if that score lead does bleed over to 20,000 points, I mean, Tonels can strike at any minute here, but I believe, I don't know if this is this the second to last pick?
No,
this is the third.
to last.
There's 2 more picks after. So even then, if this doesn't work out for Tonels, they do have another pick afterwards, but they have exhausted all the rice picks, so maybe they would have to take notes from Hybrid 2. But anywho, like I mentioned earlier in the stream, I do like to compare this to Ska's Odd Loop, which, like I said, is a lot more outer column focused on these streams, but they also have these really nasty trills. Either you're doing both hands or just one hand as well. So pretty much your typical textbook ska chart with lots of these dump sections here, these abrasive trills, abrasive burst streams, and even some anchors hidden here and there.
A pick like this one's very interesting. I think on one aspect, it is a little bit risky on the side of Tonels, not only because of the consistency, but we saw Rice 2 bans, and if most people are aware of Rice 2, it is heavily filled with a lot of just one-handed, two-handed trills, just similar to a pick like this one. And I think one aspect that might have led to that bin potentially is just that Astal being able to capitalize a lot more on the simpler patterns. So potentially a pick like this one, just how Rice 4 went, maybe we could see a few misses from Astal.
Yeah, and this map being a lot more lengthier as well, clocking over the 3-minute mark as well, so that consistency factor can wear off from Astal. But the pattern we have seen from Tonels is that consistency begins to fall near the end of the chart, but we aren't even halfway through, and Tonels picks up the first break of the chart here. But there is still lots of map left to go, and I mean, it's definitely not over yet because there are still more of these sections left to go. And it is entirely possible for Astal to potentially find something here. So not entirely over yet, and even then that leads only by not even 8,000 points or so. And a solid break section here for these players to kind of regroup. Tonels, a possibility to get that combo up, while Astal running away with this accuracy right now, 99.85.
Very concerned for Tonels just because of how this kind of pattern has been going off. I mean, if Astal is able to manage that consistency and still hold on to the very end, that's going to start to snowball just a lot more. Just like we've seen in some other matches where even just a slight lead on some of these picks snowballs into such a great length that it's a little bit concerning, especially given that there's only 2 picks left before the final scoring.
Yes, for sure. And I feel like the way this match has been heading, final scoring is destined to occur. But Tonels going to pick up the second break, and now the pattern is really starting to show with those breaks showing up near the end of the chart. And I mean, Astal has been so consistent on this pick. I don't think their accuracy has barely even moved at all. I think maybe just fallen by just a couple hundredths of a percentage, but that is natural with just the abundance of 300s you can pick up of these nasty streams. And Tonels, unfortunately, going to drop the ball here and bleed out 13,000 points on favor of Astal. A V1 SS. Oh my goodness, from Astal. 994k, just shy of the 995. Tonels as well, 980k with a couple of pretty bad judgments here with the breaks and the 100s. But even then, very solid performance from both sides. But Tonels now really gonna really have to think here. This is their last pick. And I believe the lowest this score lead can go, I believe, is 50,000. Am I correct? So, Astal right on the doorstep. If they can rack up 9,000 points before final scoring, they can successfully avoid that and take the match. So they're gonna have to get some nail biters here, and there's only 3 picks remaining, and they're gonna go for LN3.
Okay. I think this or Hybrid 3 should be fine, although obviously this one being up on the more technical side, so I think things could swing either way, especially just because this pick isn't as physical, but we'll kind of have to wait and see. It's just a very, very high risk, high reward situation that Tonels is in, with a lot of these picks just being high risk in general.
Yeah, I feel like with the more focus on this chart isn't really the physicality range that we have been focusing heavily on the other picks, but more or less just how well can you manage that accuracy component. Lots of these weird rhythms kind of opening up this map, which you can kind of hear. Lots of weird timings with these pretty weird mini jacks, and right now, if you can't time these long notes properly, your accuracy is going to suffer. But right now, these players are virtually tied in score, and I mean, more of these really tricky to release LNs raining down here, but as the map kind of starts to normalize here, Astal having the, as I said, that the accuracy ties up, but I believe Tono might have just a slight lead just based off the 300 count alone. But then again, these players are practically tied pretty much.
I mean, we've seen time and time again, Tano's usually having a little bit of that accuracy lead just in general. But we did see something like Rise 4 where Astal did have a little bit of that accuracy advantage. I think it's just really going to come down to trying to minimize how much of a score lead can build up for now. Especially just given that huge lead and how inconsistent Tonels has been. It's really just going to come down to, can that score lead be minimized as much as possible?
Yeah, I feel like with these next 2 picks, they cannot afford to bleed at least 13.2 thousand points, because that is the winning factor that Astal needs. But right now, Tonels has been keeping this in their ballpark just by the skin of their teeth right now, as this lead even just starting to flicker back into Astal's range. And as this map begins to simmer down just for a tad bit, Astal actually going to have the lead here by roughly 500 points. So Tonels doing an excellent job. They might not be winning the pick by points, but I mean, managing just to minimize how much is going over on the side of Astal is good enough. But we are in this final quarter. Lots of these more tricky to release LNs actually starting to rain down here, with some shields hidden inside as well. And actually, Tonels going to actually build a bit of a lead here by only just roughly 1,000 points, but that's off of just the sheer accuracy component that these two have been just putting their heart and soul into right now. But Tonels is going to find the break, and that's the pattern we have been seeing, and it's going to come back and haunt them. And Astal at the last second just snipes that lead back, and will add an extra 3,000 points to their already building score.
Those 112s definitely just make it so difficult to stay consistent on. And I think that's where Tonels might have messed up. But I don't really know what would be a really good pick. I mean, there's only two of them left, Ellen Density and the Hybrid, which I guess our last Hybrid 3 for the rest of this tournament, I think. So I think either might be fine. But yeah, it looks like we'll be seeing our more speedy, kind of Ellen biased Hybrid. I'm interested to see how this one goes, especially given how Hybrid 2 went. I think this might be the one pick that Tunnels potentially has to get back just a little bit of that score lead, especially just given how we saw Hybrid 2. I think
Yeah,
Hybrid
we're gonna
2
jump.
being, no, Ellen 2 just being more risky.
Yeah, we're gonna jump into Apollo. Kind of a bit of a 180 than the last pick. We were meant, or I talked about how the chart wasn't as physical as you would see in the other picks we have in this pool. While this map pretty much being the complete opposite, as we are, although it is very fast, you can already see 274 BPM. So you're handling 254 BPM LNs. You're handling some of these more rice components, which aren't very severe opening up this chart, but still, it is all that matters. And I think right now, I think the score meter broke for a second, but it's still going to remain in Astal's favor here.
The only thing Tunnels can really do is just try to hold that consistency. I mean, we see their act is good, but that act is starting to fall a little bit behind, especially on these more kind of technical releases. Just being jumbled with some shields and a lot of just these kind of awkward patterns, especially if you aren't too familiar with a lot of these more speedier LMs that you typically see a little bit in the later stages, but this being a bit more prevalent in this tournament, it's definitely shaking things up just a little bit.
Yeah, a bit more of an LN heavy section jumping in here, but this tempo increase not gonna affect anybody here, as that lead is only by 1,000 points. And I mean, we have seen basically, I sound like a broken record here, basically just repeating what I've said, but we're actually going to see a 200 from Astal. I don't think that'll do much in that score lead, as they have a very solid lead in that accuracy department over Tonels. And right now, oh, and there's going to be the break. I was going to talk about how Tonels kind of crumbles in the back half range, but I mean, still hasn't hit 10,000 of a lead yet, so Tonels is safer now. They still have a shot in final scoring, and even then this map is nowhere near as done. Astal still has an opportunity to maybe trade that break back, but the more this map continues, the more that lead gains on her side, and Tonels going to pick up another break, crossing that 10,000 threshold. And as we head more in these dense LNs, just overall, if Astal doesn't pick up anything, she won't find anything, but there is still map left to go. But I think we're gonna just see the pattern continue.
Especially with this section, which can be just a little bit techy, just because you're coming in kind of a little mini break section that we do, and then immediately into a section like this one. It makes sense to see why a miss is more prevalent in a section like this one.
And that was a very, very risky ending. Astal actually finding a break there, and that minimized that score lead just below 10,000. They had it. They were just at the finish line, ready to take this match and avoid final scoring. But that tricky technical ending, like you were talking about, got the best of them. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to head to final scoring.
I'm excited to see how this one goes in specific, especially just because this is a lot more physical and so much more techier. I mean, we've seen Lot make these tiebreakers, but this one just increasing the techiness even more and more.
And we are gonna jump into final scoring here. And I actually don't know what the quote like conditions are if a final scoring happens. I don't think it really matters about the score difference. It's just who has the higher score in the end. I think, at least. I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong.
So interested to see how this one goes. I mean, Especially just given the fact that a lot of these other picks don't even compare to this one. I mean, I doubt either of these players are going to hold an FC. If it happens, then it'll happen. But on a pick like this one, it is impossible to stay consistent on it. Especially with just like some of these like break burst sections where all the bursts are insanely fast.
And I mean, there is practically no such thing as these players, quote, not being able to FC. We have seen multiple times on occasion players just absolutely rewriting the rulebook and just dominating a chart, ripping it to shreds. But right now, Astal actually going to pick up the first break, and that was a nasty one at first. Like you mentioned, a very technical heavy chart with lots of these technical flams and graces coming raining down here. A couple of these mini jacks as well. And Astal gonna pick up a break as well here.
Man, I don't know if it's possible for Tonels to come back if they aren't as consistent as they possibly can. I mean, we see that Astal's actually starting to struggle a lot more with these more fast technical patterns. So if Astal is able to just keep on messing up, we might see it switch back to Tonels. I mean, we saw it happen 2 matches ago.
Yeah, it may seem like a heavy feat for Tonels right now, because 50,000 points is nothing out of any stretch of the imagination easy at all, especially with how close these two have been this entire match. But it is still doable if Astal continues finding these errors in the more technical heavy sections. But Tonels actually going to pick up 2 breaks in that mini section here, and as we wind this map down to a bit of a more break to let these players breathe, Astal above that 400 combo cap, so that lead will start to shrink by just a tad bit until Tonels gets up to that 400 combo cap. But there is still this back half of the map left to go, and it's not even just about can Astal bring this lead back into her favor. It's just more or less, can Tonels gather enough score to beat Astal, pretty much. And right now, they're missing even more.
Especially in a section like this one that doesn't focus as much on that kind of technicality aspect that we've been seeing throughout this tiebreak. I mean, this one being more straightforward, heavy on that fairly dense jump stream, but we're slowly going to start to line back into that more technical section. And I think if we're going to see anything happen, it's going to be within this last, 25-ish%.
Yeah, and right now that lead actually gonna flicker back into Astal's ballpark right now, as their combo has been staying heavy in their favor. They are at the 2,000 combo mark, while Tonels finding a couple of breaks during that session. They've just been so consistent after those few margins of error they picked up some of these breaks on, and now it's Tonels the one breaking on these more technical sections, or some of these more heavy, denser sections with lots of these LN inverse releases coming, raining down in this later chart. And I think even then, I think the stamina is really starting to hit Tonels now, as those were a lot of breaks in on their side. And Astal right now just carrying out that combo game. Their accuracy may not be up to par, but compared to Tonels, nothing really to worry about for her. I think she can even take a break here and it won't even do much. As then again, even if Tonels gets the lead here, not gonna matter. They need 50,000 points in order to completely flip the script over. But they're continuing to find more of these drops as more of these technical LNs come raining down, more of these technical sections overall. And Astal has been refusing to drop at all. And as this map is nearing its conclusion, Astal gathering a cumulative 24,000 points and climbing on her favor, and she is not looking to collapse any further. And ladies and gentlemen, I think we have our winner here.
Things like this one just requires so much finger independency. I mean, it's so easy to see why we see both these players drop so much, especially with like those like LN sections that require so much finger independency and so much LN control. It is insanely impossible to hold your consistency and even just hold good accuracy in general, as we see from both these players.
Yeah, and with that, Astal going to come out victorious here, as they have punched their ticket into the winners quarterfinals, I believe, to verse Pavid next week, which I am very, very excited for. That is going to be a match and a half. But for Tonels, it is not going to be the end of the line for them. They are going to be in absolute tank in that losers bracket, I believe, as they are going to absolutely dominate down there. I know for a fact. So be afraid, losers bracket players. But with that, this match has concluded. Once again, congratulations to Astal. And that will wrap up these earlier round of 16 matches. Our next stream will be on Saturday at 3 UTC. It will be Tavelkin versus Fuyushi, one of our losers bracket matches. So be on the lookout for that. But for now, Zeno, do you have any closing remarks for the stream?
I do just want to note that that's not being streamed. The next match actually being streamed is at 4HC. Tsutsumi Silicosis versus Real Beats. Quite an interesting match to see. A lot of players that are so strong going into the losers bracket now. Very scary to just be there in general. And I'm very interested to see how Pavin versus Astal goes, especially just because Pavin's been very, very consistent, as we've seen in that last match that he was in. So a lot to kind of look forward to, especially as we are slowly getting into quarterfinals bit by bit. But let's conclude this match.
Yeah, I've been Arizona commentating alongside with Zeno, and we will see you all at 4 UTC for our next match. Goodbye, everybody. Take care.
Yeah.